Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I should have asked Adam to do that. Adam is brilliant at doing that, and I didn't ask him, so I'm sorry. Oh, there's Ian. G'day, Ian. How you doing, mate?
Hiya.
All right, then. So I wonder, do you think, Adam, is Mr. Rupert going to be joining us this evening?
I thought so. Sorry, I've had to go back to audio again. It keeps cutting out. I thought we scheduled it, but I haven't spoken to him today.
These lawyers, they're dodgy types. All right, I'll tell you what, let's wait. Let's wait for him to come along. And the good folks from the Aviary project were going to join us, and they're not now. I got an email 2 minutes ago, and the first couple of things I've prepared are all to do with the Aviary project. In the Aviary project, I'm going to read from their blurb is, founded in London, in the UK, realised there is no easy way for individuals to meet shared knowledge and access resources in order to build novel projects in the urban air mobility industry, bringing together our expertise in infrastructure, electric aircraft and entrepreneurship. We decided to change the status quo led by private and closed initiatives. So it would have been quite a nice day for him to join us, because this is the day that Bruce can order an air taxi that's going to take him to the airport, and then he's going to jump on his Air New Zealand aircraft. Are you super excited about that, Bruce?
Words cannot express the indifference I feel towards this. It is total media hype. It's an opportunity for two companies to get some extra publicity by what would have happened. Let's just go back to the beginnings. There will have been a boozy lunch somewhere in Auckland in New Zealand, and the guys from Air New Zealand, the other guys got together and got half pickled on a bottle of Drambuie or something, and decided, hey, let's further our own fortunes by linking up together and doing more press releases, because press releases are free advertising, keep our profile in the public eye, so when this other company decides it needs more money, then everyone remembers it. And that's really what's happened. There's absolutely no substance to this whatsoever. For a start, the New Zealand Airline Pilots Association are totally anti-drone. They take every opportunity to vilify drones. And this would be a threat to them. Having pilotless air taxis is going to eat into their membership. It's going to, reduce the job opportunities. So they would be dead set against it. So this is just an opportunity for Air New Zealand to wave its little banner, and for the air taxi people to wave their little banner, and for the media to write simple or turn press releases into stories and get clicks. And it's a big lot of nothing, in my opinion.
We've got it. I'm inclined to agree. And I noticed the EASA, European Aviation Safety Agency, also today, or in fact yesterday, have proposed setting up airworthiness standards for these air taxis. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, has got to put a little bit of fear into the hearts of the people that are proponents of this sort of a thing. I wonder how long this goes. Here's Jonathan. He is here. Hello, Jonathan.
Hey, guys.
Hello. Right, we'll come back to your story there. We're just talking about air taxis. Did one just drop you into us there, Jonathan?
No, I just walked.
Oh, you walked. Oh, yes.
That's so old school.
Yeah, that's so old school. Sadly, the guys from the Aviary project are not with us, and so we'll knock that one on the head, and that will let us run very nicely into talking about, and Adam and Jonathan wanted to talk to us about aerial applications. So I guess, be it pesticide or pollen, you need some sort of a ticket to be able to do it. Do you want to take that over, Jonathan?
Sure. So agricultural aircraft operations, it's done under Part 137 of the Federal Aviation Regulations. And some people don't realize that could apply to your unmanned aircraft operation. And so what is an agricultural aircraft operation? It's defined in 137.3 as a operation of an aircraft for the purpose of 1, dispensing of any economic poison, 2, dispensing of any other substance intended for plant nourishment, soil treatment, propagation of plant life, or pest control, or 3, engaging in dispensing activities directly affecting agricultural, horticultural, or forest preservation, but not including the dispensing of live insects.
But of
that
course,
line at the end there is an amazing exemption there. I'm not sure why that's the case. I mean, I'm all for it, but I always figured you could do a lot more damage releasing bugs that aren't supposed to be there versus, well, our situation in particular.
Well, that's been, I don't know about anywhere else in the world, but in the UK, it got popular to bring in ladybirds to get rid of the aphids on your plants, and then they had massive ladybird infestations after people did that sort of a thing. So how easy is it then to get this piece of paper I suppose a lot of people are going to be interested in doing it for actual crop spraying rather than pollination.
It depends on your overall goal. I mean, there's a bunch of different uses for it, right? So you can do firefighting, like you see those fire bombers, right? They come in and they dump all that orange junk all over the fires. That's one option. Pollinating plants. You also have pesticide spraying. So there's a lot of different options for this. So it's very broad and it captures quite a lot of things. And so if this does apply to your operation, then your Part 137 applies. Some of the parts of Part 137 you cannot easily comply with. And some of them don't even make sense, such as one of them's requiring you to keep your seatbelt on, which I was like, okay. Keep in mind, Part 137 was originally amended, I believe, back in 1966 or 65 was the last time it was updated. So it was created in the 60s. So it's very, very archaic is the best way to put it. And so you have to have an exemption from certain parts of the regulations, including actually Part 107, because Part 107 specifically prohibits the carriage of hazardous materials. If you're spraying certain types of economic poisons, you're going to need an exemption from that. So you can spray. So you get an exemption. And in addition to that, you have to get what's called an agricultural aircraft operating certificate. And there's a process there. And then, so it's two things you basically need to obtain: an exemption and an operating certificate to do agricultural aircraft operations in the United States with an unmanned aircraft.
And I suppose you need all sorts of other tickets to be able to handle the poisons or the pollen or the. In fact, I guess pollen isn't a hazardous material, but does it have rights, roles, and responsibility? But I mean, do you have to handle it in certain ways, and does a regulator have to know about it? Another regulator?
No, that's not a regulated item currently, unless you're importing or exporting, I believe. Now, there's some more questions about bringing it into other countries and introducing it, and I mentioned on the call here before we went live to Bruce that apparently someone wiped out a number of the kiwi crops in New Zealand there with some bad pollen, so we're pretty wary of that.
Pollen gone bad. That doesn't seem right. So, but what about crossing state lines then? What about this is going completely off topic because I'm thinking aloud, but what about if you've got pollen from the south side of America up to the north side? Would that work? Is pollen, it's only one sort of, explain pollen a bit more to me.
I mean, it's actually a really popular question I get is where does it come from? And it's actually pretty simple. There's just guys that go out and harvest nothing but pollen, and they've got a tree shaker, and it grabs the tree just like you would harvest the nuts and shakes it, and the pollen falls down on a big sheet, and they vacuum it up, and I'm sure there's some sort of sifting mechanism to pull out all the leaves and detritus and twigs and whatnot, and then they bag it in vacuum bags, and they freeze it in a 0-degree freezer, and it's good for a number of years, and we order it by the kilo, and they send it to us.
And then,
so as far as transporting it, not an issue.
And how far would a kilo's worth of pollen go?
I am not telling.
But surely there must be an industry figure for that.
Well,
surely.
Everyone in America is all going like, what's a kilo? But anyways, except for all the drug dealers listening. But anyways.
Drug sorting in metric.
I'm like, what's that in relationship to pounds? I don't know.
2.2, I think, isn't it? 2.2. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong.
It's about a hectare, apparently. No, about 3 acres or something, isn't it? I don't know.
So you're gonna have to explain how drugs are sold in metric. Anyway, no, maybe you haven't got to do that. I don't quite understand that. So how many people have come to you, Jonathan, for crop spraying licenses then, or exemptions, or rule, bits of paper?
Well, I mean, currently I have about 5 clients going through the process, but it's starting to pick up more and more so right now, because people are starting to realize that this is an actual option and just to spray. So, I mean, the pollinating the plants is an awesome opportunity right there to increase crop yield. And so there's a there's an economic viability there that just totally makes sense. Additionally, spraying all sorts of stuff that you want in certain areas that are very hard to get to or dangerous to get to is starting to catch on with a lot of people, because some people kind of think, hey, well, we can use these drones to spray large areas in these fields and stuff. It's like the economies of scales will not work for that. You need a manned aircraft for large operations. What you want to be thinking about is this is more or less like that. You go to the home improvement store and you purchase that kind of like higher end do-it-yourself kind of sprayer so you can spray your back fence. That's kind of the idea, is that it fits this nice, like large, small areas is what it's designed for. Not large fields. No, that's going to go manned aircraft. If it's a really small field, you use a hand pump sprayer or something like that. But then you might also have opportunities, maybe like rocky reservoirs, difficult to access areas, that you might want to even have your people going out and they could slip and fall and die or break a leg or something. You have to deal with all that headache. Instead, you just send a drone out to spray herbicide on those areas. And also, I know mosquito abatement guys are starting to get very, very interested in this for combating, doing vector control and stuff for going after the diseases.
But I'm sure
it's interesting. It's interesting because there's a guy I know that does agricultural spraying with a DJI, what's the Agris drone. And yeah, when you look at it, the economics aren't that great, because you look at the capital cost of the drone, the operating costs, the traveling to and fro, all the administrative costs, all that sort of stuff, versus one guy on minimum wage with a backpack and a quad bike. It really does become very difficult to justify the cost of doing it with a drone, certainly in this country, because our minimum wage is almost zero. Why would you use a drone and tie up all that capital when the farmer can just get one of his farm hands who's doing nothing to go and do the job himself, unless it's totally inaccessible, in which case it's not productive land anyway. So do you really care that it's got a bit of gorse or something growing?
Right, but well,
sorry, go ahead, John.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that it's not the productivity of the land. It's more or less you're trying to get rid of something in that inaccessible area that you're trying to get rid of. Like you're trying to kill mosquitoes or do weed control of something because the weeds are growing up and actually damaging the infrastructure, right? So you're actually trying to more or less try to kill things that are in areas that are hard to get to. They have a good opportunity there. But
so
then
a good
also,
example is rice fields. They're a little bit inaccessible from the exterior, and they're not large enough to require, in some cases, a manned aircraft. So I know they're using them for rice fields, because you can't just take a quad bike, drive it through the water there, and trample all the rice in the process.
I've seen that. I was going to exactly ask you about that Agris, actually, Bruce, and see how he was going with that, because it's a beast of a machine. What's it, about 20 liters or something of? I think
it's 10 or 20 liters, can't remember. But when you look at the total overhead associated with and the smaller the spraying operation, of course, the worse it is, because the setup time is a constant and the travel times is fixed. So if you're only going to go out and do 30-minute spraying, you've got to charge a lot of money to do that, and that's a day's wages for someone on a quad bike who can do it in half a day, and makes it so much easier. Certainly for things like rice paddies, and that I understand. We don't have a lot of rice paddies here. We tend to get ours from the supermarket. But if you're in somewhere like Japan, I know that's a big growth area. That's where the Yamaha helicopter was also quite popular, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's made for that. Yeah, I
guess it depends. Yeah. But I think a lot of people, again, have this misconception that drones can do anything, and a drone is always the best solution. And it's not always. Sometimes, there are very good business cases not to use a drone for things like this. Just because you can doesn't mean it's the best option.
Does it give me the opportunity to start sort of like pulling Adam apart now? Can we do that? Can we bully Adam now? Just
come at me, bro.
Well, then I suppose it does. The question I immediately have is, how would they traditionally pollinate orchards if it wasn't other than like the mobile bees that you guys have over there?
It's actually rather hinky, and I should show you some footage. Those quad bikes that you're talking about, they actually mount what amounts to a leaf blower on the back of it with a big giant bin they open up and pour in bags of pollen that they mix with cornstarch and sugar and all sorts of other proprietary herbs and spices that are not proven to do anything. And they shoot it out the back of that as they drive up and down the roads. And there's like 3 of these guys spending all day in the hot sun doing this. And it's in between the rows of trees, so there's no way to know if you're getting it exactly where you want it on top of the trees. So I've got video of these guys just hauling up and down, and it's just totally wasteful with the pollen, which is kind of expensive stuff depending on how much you're using. So that's one way to do it. Another way is they used to load the beehives with basically these trays of pollen. So preloading the bees essentially. So the bee would climb out of his hive across this little line of pollen. And the idea was that he'd cover himself in pollen, go to the flower and have a pre-charge to get the flower pollinated. Well, the problem is the bee was smart and goes, oh, there's pollen right here, grabs the pollen, goes back in the hive. So that was a question that a lot of people had about those pollen trays. And then the third one, which I know has had some actual testing and success, was a liquid sprayer that's a massive piece of equipment and quite expensive that gets mounted on a tractor. And it's got a big articulating arm system that can be aimed at the various sides of the tree. And you drive up and down and spray this basically sugar liquid that you pour the pollen in. And it's sprayed onto the flowers as you drive down the rows. But the problem with it is that once you pour pollen in a liquid, it's only viable for about 2 hours. So that's a concern there. If you have a breakdown or whatnot, or you get stuck because these things are always operating in wet ground because it's the early spring and it's raining off and on. And then you've got the overhead of paying someone to do that and the heavy machinery that's quite expensive. It becomes kind of difficult to scale that up. So there are ways to do it other than drone. It's just that drone is a way to get it right over the treetops quickly.
Adam, there must be some pretty dumbass bees, because I don't think bees actually go foraging for pollen. They go foraging for nectar. The pollen is a side effect. So if there was a pollen, why are they just going out and grabbing pollen? They're not going to do anything with it.
No. Pollen is actually protein. They gather both.
Do they? I thought they just savage. Yep. I've learned something today. That's fantastic. Good day.
No, they gather pollen, they gather nectar, and they gather propolis, which is basically sap, and they use that as glue to hold their hives together. So the propolis is, if you pry off the top of a hive, it's this kind of yellowy, gluey substance holding everything together. Interesting stuff.
Well, it is, isn't it? Because here we are, sort of on various precipices of environmental disaster, and one of them being bees, and the issues that they have. Oh, and talking about environmental disasters, the dog's desperate to go out now. I'm gonna have to leave Bruce in charge. Bruce, take out.
No, but that is a good point actually, because there's been decline and there's sort of colony collapse things. Bees are becoming rarer and rarer. I know for a fact, I've written about this a couple of times, that when I was a kid and you went out and you walked across a clover lawn, you would get a bee sting. And today, if you do the same thing, there's not a bee to be seen anywhere. All we have around here are like bumblebees. The little honeybees are very, very rare in a sort of suburban environment. They used to be everywhere. And so I think alternative pollination is something that we may be forced to if we continue to knock about the insect population. I saw a study today which said that they did the weight of the insect community in some forest somewhere, and it's dropped dramatically in the last 50 years from down by about 60%, simply because of the changes we're making to the environment. So I think you've got a good product, Adam. I think it's a case of that we're going to need it whether we want it or not.
Is that a Bruce endorsement?
Well, it has to be, doesn't it, eh?
Well, thank you, sir.
He's going to be pulling that clip from and that's going to be appearing on videos all over the place now.
The product you're going to have whether you want it or not.
It is. Do I have more? What problems? Yeah, I guess I do have problems with having a requirement for it, because really Mother Nature should be doing it. But then if we really need it, we really need it. And I look for, have you had any? I mean, you said that crops might get bigger, or I think Jonathan said he might get increased yields. I mean, have you actually had any proof of that yet?
Yeah, we've had some studies that we did third party, so we didn't do anything but fly it on the way they told us to. And we do have numbers on increased nuts sets. So we've got about, from the lowest end, 25% up to 60% increase on almonds and cherries. And that's obviously, taking into account the weather when we applied it. So that changes everything. We don't control the weather. We control and stabilize pollination rates. That's what our goal is. And then we don't have anything to show you today because we're still waiting on some numbers, but there's some very, very cool apple results that came out. And not in the way that you would expect as far as increasing numbers of apples, but increasing something else. And I'm just going to tease that for later.
And so are your operations, so is again, let's try and have a pop at Adam time. Is your operation then sort of very weather dependent? So do you have to move based on forecast, now is the perfect time to do it. So then by that, where I'm trying to lead that is, does that then restrict your sort of method of operation? You can only do it at certain times when this and this is right.
Oh, yeah, it's a massive part of it. The flowers are open for a total of 2 weeks for each crop. Every year you have 2 weeks to get your bees out there or get whatever you're using out there. So that's kind of why we're attractive, actually, is because we show up and set up so quickly. And then we can pollinate around 40 acres per hour. Usually it takes, I think, if the numbers I'm quoting are correct, where I read them, it's about 6 weeks to get 4,000 semi-trucks with beehives on them across the country. So for those 2 weeks, and then that 2 weeks is for almonds, then it's for cherries, then it's for apples. So if you have a cold period, those bees are already bought and paid for in the almonds. So they're not going anywhere if the bloom coincides with the cherries, because the cherry guys, they're second in line. They get second crack. So we actually found a lot of cherry growers that were eager to adopt this quicker than the almond guys, because the almond guys already had their bees. But yeah, weather is a big thing. So it travels south to north up California, and then it goes west to east. And then, of course, there's southern hemisphere as well.
But wasn't there also an issue with the bees being only able to pollinate at certain times? And so while you could be able to pollinate at a greater window of time?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So under 55 degrees, bees just basically go back in the hive and don't leave. Just gets cold and they all huddle together in what's called a bee ball. And if you open up a hive or you have a clear hive, there's this big cluster of bees around the queen that just moves along the hive combs, warming the brood just to keep it warm by vibrating. And so they just do that all day long because it's too cold. And then at nighttime, they do that as well. And while the flowers are receptive at nighttime, the bees are inside. So we can actually keep going at nighttime when they're not doing anything. And that's not to say that there aren't some there's not to say there's not some nocturnal moths and whatnot, but like Bruce was quoting that study out of Germany, it's actually an entomological study done on insect preserves. It was over the past 25 years. Something like 75% of the biomass dropped. So it's scary stuff.
And that's a fantastic segue into did we all see that light, the night stuff? What was it? A new power pack for Ruggo. So for night operations. Pretty he done that. The boy done good. Now that's something you also specialize in that, Jonathan. You had one of the first few night waivers through, didn't you? I think.
Yeah, actually, when they first came out, one of our approvals was in the first batch. I think I have like 95 night waiver approvals now or something. So, and I have a night course actually to teach you how to fly at night. There's certain things that you need to know with proper airspace scanning techniques, because it's different at night versus the day due to how your eye actually operates. And so you have to do off-center viewing, and there's physiological conditions which happen at night. Let's say you're in Colorado higher up, right? You're going to have some issues there with your rhodopsin creation, and vitamin A deficiencies also affect your night vision. So there's a lot of things there, but I put out a course on it. And
this light, is this the minimum? I mean, they're making big claims. What claims are they making in here? They're making that FAR 107.29 requirement states that drones flying at night must have anti-collision lighting visible from at least 3 statute miles away and able to strobe with a frequency of 40 to 100 times per minute. How many people are flying with these sort of setups, and how many versions of this are there out there over there?
So for everyone that's flying under 107.29 is going to be required to have some type of anti-collision light on their aircraft, and even some of the other aircraft, like reduced visibility, reduced cloud clearance. I think even some of the beyond visual line of sight waivers also require anti-collision lights. So that's for even like daytime operations. The 3 statute miles, that phase never really give us much more guidance on that. It's like, what does that mean, right? What's the intensity of the light, right? Is this like go to the middle of the desert where there's no lights around and you can see it versus like in an urban setting, right? You'd probably never see that. And so there's some questions there as how bright do these things need to be? The FAA just gave us the minimum performance standard of 3 statute miles, and even showing like, I guess, is it omnidirectional, or how many of these do you need to put on there, and what air, what do they need to be facing, up or down? Those are a lot of considerations that pilots need to think about. And so you might not just need one of these, you might need at least 4 of them pointing up and to the sides, right? If you're going to be flying up where maybe helicopters would be flying, as opposed to maybe just on top, because like who's coming down straight on your aircraft? And if you've ever looked at these things from the side, like if you do it at 90 degree, they don't put out a lot of light. So that's why you need to have maybe 4 of these things, or 2, 3, 4 facing out. So some practical considerations there. What colors do you want to pick? Anti-collision lights in the United States, they're white and red. White's going to be seen a lot farther than a red one. But nice, cool trick is if you have a red one, that if you can actually make it go solid, then it doesn't mess up your night vision like a white one would, right? And you can actually then hit solid and then use it like a pre-flight light to inspect the area. So that's a little tip. But anyways.
So Jonathan, is it correct that you need a strobe, or is that not true?
Okay, well, you can either use a strobe or a slow burning kind of beacon, where it's kind of like pulses. And typically how it's used in the United States is, right, you have a red beacon that just kind of goes wong wong, versus the white seizure inducing strobe on the end. So you can use either one. For visibility, I would say that you'd want to use the white one. The red one, you could use it. I've heard some people have flown those things farther off and then become a little bit disoriented in their and what they're doing and they're paying attention, and then they'll accidentally confuse the anti-collision light, the red strobe on their drone, with like a tower, a cell tower. I've heard of stuff like that happening. So if you maybe have a possibility of that happening, maybe switch to a white strobe.
Cool. And this might get filed under don't ask questions you don't want the answers to, but in your opinion, is visual line of sight on a clear day on a clear night 3 miles, or is that not the case? And would that make it farther out during the nighttime than during the daytime in a clear setting?
I was going to ask that. That's a good question.
Right. So excellent question. So line of sight, when it comes to part 107, is if you go to 107.31, what is your requirement? Your requirement is that the remote piloting command, or the person manipulating the unmanned aircraft, must know, right, the entire flight, the unmanned aircraft's location, determine the unmanned aircraft's attitude, altitude, and direction of flight, observe the airspace for other air traffic or hazards, and determine that the unmanned aircraft does not endanger the life or property of another. So you need to kind of figure out whether by putting on an anti-collision light on that aircraft, you can be able to do all 4 of those things for that that given flight. That's the FAA's view. Some of us would there's some pushback we can maybe give on that, but that's the FAA's view, that if it's so far away at 3 statute miles, you're not really able to know using your eyeballs the actual aircraft's attitude, or right, does it have a bad attitude, right? Which way is it pointing? Altitude and direction you might be able to figure out, but attitude, that would be one thing that they would push back. I've seen that. Not too many people have talked about that, because they kind of just think if you got a dot in the sky, then you're good. And if it's not moving, and you kind of corroborate that with your ground control station, then why do you really need to know the attitude?
Well, that's interesting, because even a normal, like a Phantom 4, that would limit the line of sight operation to just a couple hundred meters, because at a couple hundred meters, 220 yards for you Americans, you cannot see which way the attitude of the craft itself, So are people flying beyond what is the FAA considers visual line of sight more often than they realize?
I think there's actually a possibility of that happening a lot, where people are flying these things out at the edge of. And you also have to remember, line of sight and is also directly proportional to the aircraft, the size of it, right? So if you have a bigger aircraft, you can fly it out farther, right? Versus your little aircraft, which you can't fly out very far, and starts becoming this little fuzzy little dot in the sky. Yeah, that's about I guess as much information we can provide on the conversation before the FAA starts going after somebody and we start fighting it out, whether or not somebody could actually really see the aircraft with the attitude and the altitude and direction of flight. And well, what if it's just straight up hovering there, right? You're not flying it. Well, its attitude, it's just hovering, and altitude. I mean, there's a lot of interesting arguments we can have around that, but I don't know if you'd really want to be in like the hot seat with the FAA coming after you and trying to pull your night waiver. Because if you're flying at night, they're going to be coming after you and trying to pull your night waiver or fine you for flying at night in violation of the regulations and pull maybe your remote pilot certificate or fine you.
Now, all these regulations, they apply if you're flying, for example, in what we call a shielded environment. So you're maybe flying below the level of the trees in a wooded area. There's no dispensation for that. There's no possibility of any manned aircraft actually being. Is it navigable airspace? And what's navigable airspace in the USA?
Yeah, so that's a great argument. I think that is an argument that could be argued. Specifically, if you look at the waiver guidelines, one of the things it actually says is like, how are you going to actually increase the visibility really of the aircraft to other non-participating aircraft, or how are you going to fly in such a way as to ensure that there's no other non-participating aircraft flying there, right? So maybe you could be flying in a situation where it's restricted airspace, a temporary flight restriction, something like that, right? Where you don't need to notify anyone else if you have proper approvals to fly there and no one else does, right? That might be a mitigation. You're still gonna have to get a waiver for all that, right? But that would be the argument you would make to the FAA on that standpoint. Or you're flying really low altitude, close to certain structures, within 400 feet of certain structures, or even closer. The only problem is when you start masking, you get into all sorts of radio line of sight issues. Anyone ever heard of the Fresnel zone? And all of that. So, I mean, well, you know that. Watch the videos on that, right?
Yes, that's right.
I'm like, I think you have a few videos talking about that, actually.
Well, the other thing, though, is like Gary and I both have a push to keep manned aircraft out of that lower airspace. Isn't this requirement to have all these beacons and everything an acknowledgement by the FAA that the manned aviation community may not be playing by the rules? They may be operating at lower than allowed altitudes, and therefore the drone community has to take responsibility for these AWOL pilots.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up wow. Woo. That's like a sacred cow there you just went for. Like, hey, like, let's ask John some questions about stuff that'll take off all the helicopter people. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Now that I got that out of the way, you can send your hate mail, Bruce. Okay. So just clarifying that. There's actually some. Yeah, so I mean, there's some interesting issues there regarding the helicopter pilots and the crop dusting pilots that can fly lower altitudes, and we need to be making our aircraft visible to them. So there's a good point there for safety that we need to actually do that, and at the same time, they need to be taking responsibility that that we have the ability to actually operate in this area. And there's some discussion that I've never heard really talked about so much. From the manned aircraft side of things, is that if you were flying your helicopter or your crop duster over maybe like a trash dump, for instance, you'd probably be like, well, that's crazy if you're doing that at a low altitude, primarily because there's birds everywhere and you're going to be recreating some scene out of Star Wars, like the asteroid scene, right? And you're like flying between them like, oh my gosh, am I going to get hit? And so when you start flying at lower altitudes and warmer environments and highly populated areas, the drone sightings data that I put out shows you that statistically speaking, there's going to be a greater probability of seeing drones in highly populated areas and warmer environments, right? Maybe like, let's say New York City during a warmer environment. Oh, I think someone found that one out. Miami Beach, right? Just remember that whole the helicopter that flew right under that other drone. And so I know there was the whole, how high could he have flown? Was he flying in a careless, reckless manner? Did he see the helicopter? I understand all that. We're not going to analyze that portion for this, but more or less from a risk assessment standpoint, if you're a manned aircraft pilot operating a helicopter at a lower altitude or an agricultural aircraft operation, you need to kind of do a risk assessment. Am I operating in an area that could potentially have unmanned aircraft flying there, and I need to be looking for anti-collision lights if I'm flying during under at least 107's version of Civil Twilight or at night. What's also interesting is the FAA seems to be also kind of aligning with this. If you go to some of the chart supplements and look around them, there actually specifically is warnings in them telling people, like specifically that Miami-Dade actually has one in the Southeastern chart supplement saying, hey, be on the lookout for unmanned aircraft below, I think, 300 feet in that area. It's like they're starting to actually put people on notice, like, hey, great, it's warm environment, a whole lot of people there, nice area on the beach. Maybe you should think twice before flying down the beach. I'm not saying like you're restricted from doing that. I'm just saying that's an added risk. Just FYI, think about it. Okay, now send your hate mail to Bruce or
Yeah,
Gary or Patrick.
Or Patrick, any of us.
So
No,
the-
I've seen a lot of reviews.
The drone community
No,
gets
Patrick's
hard,
not
fast
here, so send it to
regulation.
Patrick.
Yeah, the drone community gets hard and fast regulation. The manned aviation community gets advisories.
Send your hate mail to.
You won't be drawn on that. Well, as you know, I just say no GA below 2K. Get them up and out of the way. But of course the crop duster's not going to, and potentially the helicopter also, unless it's a police helicopter, which is a different, different kettle of ball games altogether. He's not going to be. Adam, it sounds like he could be pollinating at night with those fancy lights on. There really nothing should get in his way, then, should it? It really shouldn't. No, which I've answered myself, haven't I?
Well, yeah. I mean, other than a news helicopter, a police helicopter, or some sort of, crisis situation for wildfires in California, I don't really know what would be going on. And in that case, we're not going to even be there.
Yeah, you're going to be getting out of the way doing the pilotly thing. Similarly, if there's a police operation or something, you get out of the way, wouldn't you? Victor says, but how many helis are there compared to SUAS news now? And yeah, I mean, we the drone community definitely outnumbers the manned community by quite a wallop.
And helicopters are very noisy. You can hear a helicopter coming from at least 1.5 miles. So if you're flying a drone, you hear a helicopter coming, well, you're going to land, aren't you? Or you're going to make sure that you're in a position where you no longer pose a threat. So that should be the level of responsibility on the drone operator's part. And I think the manned aviation community has to realize that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And in a helicopter, I mean, you obviously can't come straight down a helicopter because there are safety issues, but your approach slope can be quite steep, and therefore there's no need to fly below. It's only saving on fuel, saving on a little bit of time, that they would want to fly that low anyway, apart from the takeoff and landing. I mean, you can't come vertically down because you can get descent under, where you get recirculation. But you can come in at a 45-degree angle. So the area, if you're going to land, the area where you're below 400 feet should be relatively small. So I think it's just, I know here that we've got helicopters flying past my house at about 150 feet because it's convenient for them, because they leave from their pad and they go out and do some agriculture operations maybe 2 or 3 miles out, and they'll just fly the whole distance at 150 feet because it saves fuel. No, that's not good enough. If we are going to be bound by regulation, restricted in what we do for the reasons of safety, then so should manned aviation. Convenience should always be secondary to safety.
Oh, yes. Very good. That's a very good line. Very, very good indeed. And when we're moaning at regulators, trying to be a DJ now, you see, now we can turn to Ian to talk about moaning to regulators. Because over in the UK, you guys have just thrown up a survey. I think this very evening, wasn't it, Ian?
Yeah, it's the approved drone pilots, guys. And I don't think any of them could make it tonight, so I said I would give it a mention. It's just recently there's just been a lot of, I think, generally frustration vented online from commercial operators. Some of it prompted by the CA, doing a tweet saying we're going to employ a new position that's going to be specifically set up to audit and basically quiz commercial operators, which is fair enough. They say, oh, well, we do that with the rest of general aviation. But the point was, there's no resource to tackle illegal drone use at the moment. So it's like, well, what about the priority of that first? If the skies were full of general aviation and people flying about in planes that were all doing it illegally, you wouldn't be first going for British Airways. You would be tackling that issue first. So people are saying, why isn't that being tackled before we start investing money in going for your commercial operators? So I think that just sparked a lot of people just to say, I'm a bit sick of this, saying, like there was one guy that was a 20 years experience as a cameraman who'd gone into drones. So he'd been sold all the, this is the new, this is the future. If you pay for your training, pay for your drone, pay for your insurance, and all this, with your experience as well, you're guaranteed an income. And then obviously he's found that actually all his normal video works, what's paying the bills and putting the food on the table, and the drone's just, you know, a small supplementary income on top, which isn't what it was sold as. So, you know, there's those kind of general frustrations, and obviously people saying,
but that's not that's not the regulator's fault. The regulator didn't sell him that package.
Well, no, it's you know, it's kind of the point though that this was kind of just wrapped up in those entire frustrations, though, in the fact that if your use case is video and it is photography, then a lot of that trade's being taken by, or some of it at least, you know, we can debate whether that's a lot or a small amount, but it's been taken by illegal operators. And you could even argue there's a case that there's, you know, there could be saturation of even your commercial operators. So in which case there is an argument, because if someone's saying, you know, you pay me training fee and I'll put you through and you're guaranteed work at the end of it, you know, it's, you know, skies are paved with gold. And they know full well that the entire area you're working in is saturated with operators already, then that isn't obviously a fair selling of the work. You know, it is tough, and really you need a niche, especially if you're going in with video and photography rather than mapping or some other idea that no one else is trying. I think it's just, so it's kind of, it's just all those frustrations, although that isn't what the survey about really. The survey is just trying to capture the general views of people in the commercial industry. So, you know, there's a little bit of coverage of that. So it's kind of covering, you know, have you ever lost, you know, just asking a simple question. Have you personally ever lost some work to an illegal operator? I think that's a fair question to know. It'd be good to be able to gauge how many people have and how many people haven't. There's the question of, do you think the PricewaterhouseCoopers estimate is genuinely likely to occur? Not just yes or no. There was that kind of covered in the DFT survey, so that was one that overlapped, but it was just simpler because there it was kind of spread out over 4 or 5 questions. It wasn't like a yes or no so much, where in this case it is, and it's asking the question as well: do you think the media have used drone footage that's illegal? You know, it's good to have a view on that. I mean, I certainly seen stuff used by the BBC when there's been flooding and that. You see people putting the drones up, and it's clearly not, you know, some of that is clearly not legal. When we saw it in the incident recently in Belfast. So just getting that view of, do you know, getting those actual views so that there's numbers to it, so people can say, yeah, it has affected me and it's a problem. Other people might go, oh, you know, I think there's maybe an issue there, it doesn't affect me. But also asking the question, are you satisfied with enforcement, and are you satisfied with legislation? You know, for example, are you happy with the numbers of people that are being prosecuted for illegal use? You know, it'd be nice to know yes or no. Are people satisfied? Again, yeah, with future legislation, you know, if you were burdened with more red tape, would you potentially think of dropping out of the industry? So it's useful to know, because no one's actually said, well, if we put all this legislation in place, will you still decide to be in business, or will you drop out? At least, if you know, if for example, you know, 50% of operators have actually, with the way things are now, if I'm going to be burdened more, I'll consider dropping out. At least the regulator can know and think about it, and think actually there could be this potential impact. You know, they can still choose to ignore it, but at least someone can then say we're aware of what the potential impact could be. And no one could say that at the moment, because the DFT survey wasn't asking any of that. It was purely focused around their future points of legislation and didn't look at broader questions. And this is more covering the broader questions of what, and getting all that feedback from operators that's never been asked before. And you know, although all the operators at the moment, they're all in, you know, either people just in no groups at all, or people might be with RPAS, or they might be with Drone Safe Register, or they might be approved drone pilots, or they might just be on Facebook groups and nothing else. But nobody is saying, what are your views, and trying to pass that to the regulator. And the trouble you've got as well is, if you're in organisations, they may well ask some of your views, but often that will then get filtered up at the top, and they'll only pass forward the issues that, you know, those at the top of the chain consider it to be an issue, rather than everybody.
But surely you're going to have to do a little bit of filtering, otherwise you're going to have 1,000 perhaps potential different Silly
There's only
little view.
4,000 operators, so that's the maximum you could get, unless there's a load of people that are considering jumping
It's
into
a big meeting, isn't it? With 4,000 comments from people.
Well, it's a yes, no, don't know. So you can just literally put that as a graph, can't you? For each question. I think I must admit I've not filled it in myself yet, but I think there is a comments box. So obviously the comments, you would have to go through those. But if you just wanted a boom, I want to have a look and get an immediate feel for each question, you'd be able to do that. So it's about doing that, and hopefully enough people will fill it in where we can get the DFT or the CAA to look at it.
How are you going to try and put it under their nose?
If people understood what everyone's view is, because I think we all know, I think all of us, depending on what our use case is, will have different views. But it would be nice to collect those and see what we agree on and what we disagree on.
And how are you going to put it underneath their nose? How are you going to make sure they hear this?
Well, I'll say it's not me who's doing it at the end, so I don't know the full process, but it'll be approved drone pilots that do it. They've got connections there, the CA, and so I think DFT. I guess it'll depend on how many people there. I mean, if you get several hundred people upwards that filled it in, it's not going to be a problem because you can have a good proportion of people there. If you just got maybe just 200, it might not even be worth putting through because there might not be enough data there to derive any conclusions from. But
it'd be interesting to do this. Well, yeah, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting or worth repeating in Australia or New Zealand and America, and see if what the feeling of a young industry is out there. No, I suppose no one is asking these questions, is it? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if there's nothing else as well, I mean, I don't know if they plan to, but it'd be good to just see just the totals published. Then, like you say, people in America could copy it, in Australia, and we could get even then a world view of those very same issues, because the issues here will be no different to in any other country.
Well, I bet, should we just throw it around the ring and guess what the biggest gripe will be? I think I know what it'll be, but I'll let other people go first. What do you reckon, Bruce?
No free biscuits.
That's exactly on the now.
They do, wouldn't you? Yeah. It's interesting. I think they're just going for low-hanging fruit, though, aren't they? I mean, that's it. It's easy. They've got a list of these people who are approved drone regulators, and the aviation regulator is used to working with people who are beholden to them for the right to fly. And so it's much easier to corral these people into make sure they're doing the right thing. They're not used to dealing with the general public because there's no other form of aviation where you can engage without having some kind of qualification. So therefore, they've probably said, too hard, we'll just deal with the easy ones. Then when the politicians come to us, we can say, look, yes, we're doing something. And that's what it boils down to.
Well, I thought everyone would just chirp up and say enforcement. Everyone around the world's going to moan about enforcement.
Yeah, I think that would be I think that would be number one. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. It's certainly built there towards the top, because that is frustration if you're paying commercially. The one you expect to be on a level playing field, and I think the frustration is if you want to be commercial, you're effectively tying your own hands behind your back, effectively, because I'm adhering to all the laws. I'm being particularly safe. I'm doing this, that, and the other, and everyone else that's not doing so can do as they please. And as we mentioned already, we've seen cases where commercial operator will be in a safe position using a zoom lens, filming live news of what's going on, and then a hobbyist will fly in right up to what's going on, take the footage. There's his cooler, and theirs gets used, and obviously that isn't a fair position to be in. And ultimately, it will mean that there will definitely be some people that will fall at the wayside, where they will, fold up the business because it eventually just doesn't, it's just not worth it.
John Gustafsson in the comments is saying that mapping is the best ROI for UAS in the USA, and I think it's one of the best around the world. Actually,
it is. But again, if you look this week, DJI is bringing out the Phantom 4 RTK, and there's people complaining already. Well, it's making easy mode and low. It's the same low cost of entry. I mean, actually, you can do it cheaper with open source, but the wider community doesn't know that. But some people are saying, well, anyone now can go out, buy the Phantom, boom, and they can do mapping. Now we know
but it won't make their maps any more correct. That's the trouble. That's a sort of a marketing hype If you find a good surveyor, it's not just a matter of adding in RTK and suddenly
No,
it makes it all a lot better. You need all, yeah, you need all sorts of things. It's not the be all and end all, and there are lots of great RTK solutions out there already.
If you'd like to speak with someone that does a lot of that, John Gustafson, that you just actually spoke to there, would be a great person to talk to. Hello, John, by the way.
You're bringing your own fans, are you? I see how it works.
How dare I bring viewers? No, I didn't do it.
And PPK Solutions.
Just to jump in one point, and you can answer it's true or not. Surely with mapping, even that will get to a point where there will be limited opportunities, because surely construction companies at the moment that might be paying a commercial operator to come in and do it, surely they're just going to train up their own people and do it in-house.
That's already happening. That's already happening. It's going in-house. It's gone from a let's dabble with it. Does it really work? Right. We'll just buy an operator in, have a little go at it, see if it's any use. Oh, yeah, it's useful. Right. We'll train a couple of guys and we'll bring it in-house. That's already happened. And the people I know that are in the mapping industry are specialists, even specialists, you know, specialists within the mapping industry at, say, linear inspections or building inspections or whatever. They have a real speciality, and they leverage that. So that's already happening, I think, Ian. I think that's
it's like computers, isn't it? Back in the old, when I was a boy, you had this, computers were an outsourcing thing. You know, you had bureaus and data processing centers, and no one had their own computer. They were far too expensive and complicated. These days, who doesn't have their own computer?
Yeah, and Alpha Pyrotechnics and RTK base stations are not cheap, and most people can't afford it or understand how to use it properly. And that is the baseline. Just buying a Phantom with the word RTK, you might as well just, in a lot of use cases, just write RTK on the side, exactly with one of those.
This is the Phantom upgrade tool here. You can buy these in any other.
It's $2,000. That's right. Yeah, for that. Yeah, that's a calibrated pen. He never misses a show. That's great. RTK can get signal loss and mess up in the data set. Yeah, and that's where your skill and knowledge and experience is coming. Is not knowing when you've got a great picture or great data. It's in knowing is when it's rubbish and you've got to truth it. I'm not a surveyor. I've watched a lot of surveyors doing it, and they quite clever people. There's a reason why they've got to have a piece of paper to say they could do these sort of things.
Giving a man a scalpel doesn't make him a surgeon.
No, it doesn't. I can't think of anything to come back to that, but that's right. Yes, or a pen doesn't make you Shakespeare, does it? And so on and so forth, and carrying on. Yes. A
room full of monkeys, however, with typewriters.
Absolutely, and here is that room. Here we are. Here we all are. Oh, I was just going. Oh no, I was going to ask Nicola there. What's on the build table there, Nicola? What have you done?
Yeah, hi. Right now I'm just finalizing the updated solar installation for my workshop. Last of the thicker cables are going in right now. Other than that, flew the crosswind last week, just before the weekend, and very, very interesting results. Some people may have seen the RC groups thread, and that some people had some issues with the tail and the incidence of the tails of the horizontal stabilizer, making the plane behave quite weirdly in manual mode when flown at higher speeds. And in fact, I can confirm that there seems to be an issue with that thing, although I have been informed that my Fly Dream are working on an updated tail and are testing it, so they can try and figure out the issue. That being said, though, some of you may have seen my flight, at least the takeoff, the first maiden takeoff of the crosswind with a brand new Omnibus F4 Pro with RG plane on it, live on Facebook, because I actually streamed that. And those might know that actually, despite the comments that were left under the video. The plane didn't crash. I didn't get the I didn't fly the Phantom, so I can go and look for the plane. In fact, the autopilot handled all of these tail-related issues absolutely perfectly. And I have to be honest here, putting that aside, that tail thing aside, if you're going to fly this on autopilot alone, you will never know there's a problem with the tail on that plane, because I flew it for a few minutes in one of the stabilized modes before I switched to manual and, you know, tested to see what the issue was. And the plane was absolutely stellar. No tip stall at all. I tried in manual mode, in a stabilized mode. No matter what you do, that plane just wouldn't tip a wing. And I think it is one of the most stable platforms that I've flown lately. And I would venture to say that it is, with the default PIDs, better performing, like better handling in the air than the Believer. That is my opinion. The Believer with the default PIDs did shake quite a bit more, although granted, I have not yet flown this plane in more turbulent conditions, and I might get a chance to do so in the coming days, because the weather is turning a little bit to the windy parts of this season. But very, very impressed by the overall stall performance of the plane. Just belt type of shaking, it would drop the nose, pick up speed, and I've been able to stably slow it down to below 25 kilometers an hour without any noticeable shakes, rolls, throws, whatever.
The big question then, what about the milliamp hours per kilometer? Is it, and John Gustafsson asks, is it T-tail or a crucifix? It's a standard old tail, isn't it? It's a crucifix.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the milliamp hours, how hello airheaded them, the milliamp hours per kilometer, is it what? Because they had a fantastically low figure, they told you.
No, yeah. Right now with the current motors, the current 11x7 wooden props that came with this, with the plug-and-play set, a forward CG suggested by My Flying Dream to maybe sort of combat the tail problems, but sadly it doesn't. But it is definitely nose heavy that way, more than what the manual suggests. The numbers, even though for some reason I'm having a hard time calibrating the current meter on the OSD, the values are about twice what I was quoted, at least with my current configuration right now, without really digging into improving the efficiency, just flying the plane for the sake of it, just to see how it flies, if it flies, what problems there are. Yes, the ailerons are a bit docile, that is true, if you're trying to stall the plane. As long as you're flying at normal speeds, like above 35 kilometers an hour, 40 plus, 50 plus, that shouldn't be a problem, because there should be enough airflow over those to have decent control. And in fact, when flying normally, I did not feel a lack of control from the ailerons. That was only noticeable when I was trying to stall the plane. It would really, really slow down to like below 25 kilometers an hour. So efficiency, I would put it, for the time being, it is actually slightly higher than my clouds, around 120 milliamp hours per kilometer on 6S. But I still have quite a lot of CG to play with. Moving the CG backwards would improve efficiency, as that has been my experience with other planes in the past. Also, perhaps going lower kV on the motors and larger props would help with that as well.
So we're still not, you've not hit the magical 6 hours then with it yet?
No. I am going to build a lithium-ion battery specifically for the Believer, and I think it's going to be around 21 amp hours 6S. So that's about just under 2 kilograms.
Well, that actually leads me the new one. The name I keep forgetting. The thing. Crosswind,
Yeah,
wasn't it? Yeah,
Crosswind.
What flying weight were you flying it at?
The other day it was around 3.6, 3.7 kilograms, so a bit lighter than probably most people would fly it at. I even had to add a like a battery as dead weight in the nose just to get the CG to that 95 millimeters that was suggested to me by My Flight Dream to sort of combat the weird tail thing, which it didn't, of course, but still, to get that CG, I had to put that battery in there, in addition to having a few cameras placed on the plane at a few spots.
And has it got plenty of holes for drilling out for, can you tell I'm interested in getting one of these? Has it got plenty of holes for drilling out cameras for mapping?
Not really templates for that. So basically you're free to drill wherever you want, wherever is going to be convenient for you. They do provide these things, which are supposed to be glued to the bottom of the plane to protect it on landings, but I didn't put them because for me this is a bit too narrow, and that would put a lot of stress in a small portion of the belly of the plane. And when you load that up to, like, mine is still light at 3.6 kilograms, but if you load that up to 5.5 kilograms, which is the quoted maximum takeoff weight, this is going to put a lot of stress on, you know, that amount of foam actually.
Well, we just used a bit of, on the Believers, we just have a bit of aluminium going from the nose all the way almost back to the tail.
Well, actually, these things on the Believer, this is probably one of the best solutions I've seen so far of tackling the problem of damage to the foam during landings. I think the only thing that tops it, and only by little, is the plastic cover that you get for the XUAV clouds that actually glues to the bottom of the plane, because that thing is even tougher than this. I don't know what that gray stuff is. It's like super dense foam, at least it feels that way. But the only thing that I've seen that's performing better than that is the plastic cover for the bottom of the clouds, and that has held up perfectly.
Yes.
I really don't understand why other manufacturers haven't picked up on that.
Just don't include them. Yeah.
It's like 0.5 millimeter thick of some, I don't know what it is, some thicker nylon stuff. Doesn't weigh anything. It's easy to install, and it's probably easy to make. And it saves so much effort on the part of the user of having to figure out a way to reinforce the bottom, and also protects it quite a lot.
Yeah. And I should, before I forget, because I've just noticed we've just gone over the hour, so I have to call. Did anyone else have anything else in a minute? The link to the survey that Ian mentioned is in below. It is below, so just drop along there. And Rich Russell, who's a UK NQE drone trainer and assessor, says we are getting more and more companies sending their people on courses to cut out hiring dedicated third-party companies. It's definitely is a shift in the market. I think the market has grown up and knows what it wants now. It didn't know what it wanted a couple of years ago, but now businesses know what they want, and they know the quality of data they want as well. They know exactly how they want it to fit into their is it BIMS, building information management systems, or something like that. They want it all slotting in these days, all that good stuff. So yes, so that will then be my call to say, gentlemen, was there anything else that caught anyone's eye this very week?
Yes, more drone vilification in the media. That crash report with the drone flying into or being shot into the Mooney wing, I saw some really bad bits of writing surrounding that. One of them I read said that the drone's propellers cut into the leading edge of the wing in a way that could have damaged the aircraft and caused it to crash. Well, the drone that they shot didn't have any propellers on it. So what video were these people watching? The standards of journalism, are atrocious. And here in New Zealand, I saw a thing, a drone expert calling for stronger regulation because it's only a matter of time before a drone brings down a major aircraft. And I'm thinking, okay, who is this expert? And I looked up, he's a drone salesman. That gives him the expertise to make these claims. And seriously, the media is just not fact-checking anything. It's crazy. There was another story where there was someone living in a fairly affluent part of our biggest city, had a little statue in the backyard on a plinth, you know, it was worth about $4,500 or something. They saw a drone flying over their house, and the next morning the statue was gone. So everyone's like, the drone stole the statue, or at least it would have been used to case the joint. And then, of course, this thing weighed about 3 or 4 kilos, by the way. Then the next thing is have these stories in the media, and people are saying, like, drones should be banned. People shouldn't be allowed to have drones. There should be no drones in private ownership. And then one person says the usual, they're far too noisy, they disrupt the peace and quiet. And someone else says, they're so quiet you can't hear them, so they can spy on you. And others saying, I don't want drones spying on me when I'm having a shower, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, these people, what is wrong with them? But it's just the way the media has warped their perception and changed their minds. It's like our biggest enemy isn't the regulators. It isn't the risk of hurting anyone or damaging anything. It's just the idiot numpties out there on the street who believe everything they read, and the media for portraying all this stuff in that way. And I don't know where we go on this one, but someone needs to do something.
Well, we need to invent a new hobby for the media to vilify. We need to invent the new skateboarding or the new whatever, and then we can divert attention with the, hey, look over there. The drone, oh yes, in the comments talking about the pneumatic cannon stationary object. Yes, there was all sorts of nonsense about that thing here as well. It was bad news all around, but it'll be forgotten soon. It will have. It's you know, today's news, tomorrow's chip wrapper, isn't it? And it'll be gone. It'll move along till we get to the next.
The one disappointing thing with that story is the way it's spread out and got to the media as easily as it has done. Is that a lot of the responsibility lies with drone users, because if there's ever a positive drone story, like there are almost every day, that someone's life saved, you don't see people spamming that onto every phone. Oh, look, someone's life was saved by drone today. But every time there's a negative story, you'll be on a group, and about one person posts, oh, look at this. 5 minutes later, no one ever even scrolls down. Boom, it's on again and again and again and again. And it's that annoys me enough that people don't even scroll down and check it's being posted. But it's the very fact that as soon as a negative story, it's boom, spread it. It's like, why are you even doing that? Why don't you even understand that because you are spreading all the negative stories, you're just as bad as the media and everybody else? You know, you don't see people that are passionate about cars posting every crash and drunken driver. It's just like, you know, we can all read the news ourselves, thank you. You don't need to post it all over Facebook. So that's my rant.
Have you not just described the whole modern problem though, for everything? Considering
the low resolution information on Facebook, you could pretty much just start a channel that's pro drone and fake all the videos.
How dare you talk about us like that? Anyway, it's just, you probably could, yes. Yeah, no, you're right, Ian. We should all be more responsible for spreading around the good news. So maybe that's a New Year's resolution then for this year, moving into 2019. Maybe we'll start it early, and we should do that. Make a point of it.
Every day, I'll make a post. I'll make a post saying I didn't hit an airplane today. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, Bruce, you've got a lot of followers. I think you should, on your channel, just plead with them not to spread negative stories. That will be a start. Because I've stopped doing that ages ago. And the thing that frustrates me the most, obviously, is when you get industry bodies doing it. They have no excuse at all. But if all of us are individuals, and if you see your mate do it, go, oh, mate, what are you doing? Why are you posting negative story? If we could all just stop that, because every single spreading of that is another click and another click and another click. And as long as they're getting clicks, the media are going to keep on doing it.
Yeah, mind you, it's like the if it's spread within things like RC groups and that, and within the community, that doesn't cause any problems because we already know about all that. I think most of the spreading goes on outside the community, so we're not going to have much ability to stop people doing that. You know, little some housewife sees a story, oh, that, you know, the drone spying on young children, oh, this could, you know, and they send it to their other housewife friends and their soccer mums, and before you know it, that's where all the disinformation gets out. As a community, we tend to know the truth from the facts.
Oh no, I think you're being old school. You're on the RC groups and stuff. You're seeing how it used to work. If you're on Facebook and Twitter, it's the opposite. It's the actual drone pilots themselves seeing these stories first. It's spreading out, and then because obviously there's so many media people there, and sooner or later it's been spread that much, it's appearing on their timelines. You know, so some of those stories, if they don't get spread by the drone community, just disappear and vanish. They're definitely. With Facebook, it's always people want to be like, oh, I'm the only person that knows this news. Bang. I don't know why that is, but it's a general problem, but it is frustrating.
And that explains why I don't use Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah, well, I'm just scrolling back because I think we ran that video. I put that video in, I think, at least
a long time ago,
1.5 to 2 weeks before it got picked up by everybody else, and I think I just ran it as a that's interesting. I'm trying to see. It was a while ago. It was before the 8th of October anyway. So yeah, it is amazing what gets picked up and how long it takes to get picked up as well. It always surprises me, you know, just how long it takes stuff to get into the mainstream media, because obviously I'm looking out for this stuff. No, I can't see how far back it is.
Well,
right.
You can be sure that if you kill somebody, it's going to get into the media pretty quickly.
Not here.
Yeah, that'll be in the media in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But people get the thousands of people get killed on the roads, and that barely rates a mention. And people get killed in light aircraft crashes, that barely rates a mention.
Yes,
so
exactly.
why? It's the whole
That's an idea, actually, but nobody's died from a drone strike yet.
Not yet. Not
You
yet.
don't live in Afghanistan then?
No. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
not that kind of drone strike. All right, maybe the worst strike was the best one to use here.
But that's the thing. I mean, people are killed every day by these military drone strikes. No one gives a damn. Yet a recreational drone, which has never killed anybody, it's the worst thing since the devil himself.
Yeah, the irony is, if it was happening all the time, it wouldn't be news. But yeah, when something doesn't happen,
we need to kill more people with their drones.
That's the moral.
No. Why do I always go on, let him go on so long, and then he always does this? Yeah.
No, but there is a point. There is a lot of this sort of like gleeful anticipation and schadenfreude going on for the hopeful public waiting for the evil drone to do something, just the way the Teslas did, where the first fire, everyone had a big giant celebration of glee at their demise, which was just awful.
Yes. I see someone, Chrissy Admins mentions Lily Next Generation in the comments. I'm not sure if that's coming along, but what I wanted to know, I've forgotten the name of the thing. That thing from that clever bloke in Canada that's still the Plexi drone. I see there's some... Sorry?
I was saying, is that still going? Because I've been following that for years, and then the bit my favourite part of all of that was they did a video on, and I think it was RC Groups that posted it from YouTube, where they go, "This is our drone taking off, and this is it doing a perfect landing," and all they did was reverse the video for the landing. But what they didn't think, they had a fountain in the background. And because they reversed the video, the water was going up and back into the fountain, so you knew it had been made.
Well, no, it's a powerful engine because that's drawing the air back in and it's pushing the water back into the fountain. So that's what I think is a flipping powerful system, and I personally would love to have one. Yeah, no, it's still going on, and I can't remember how many million they raised, but it was quite a chunk of money, and I think it's probably at year 5 or something like that. But they're mounting a new legal action in Canada now. Under their fair trading sort of acts, I think. So hopefully for those people that are caught up in them, because I think it wasn't cheap, was it? Was it about $2,500 or something? back in the day. It was a chunk of money.
It was cheaper than that, but they had it all so you could buy the bolt-on, so you could buy the drone itself, and then you bought the payload, and then you bought the backpack. And to be honest, the whole design concept that came up with it, with
very nice,
modular, was fantastic. But the director then was going on all the various Facebook groups, because funnily enough, he came onto one that I was on. So straight away, I went on and I quizzed him, and he was going. So I said, "Well, because he said you're bringing a new drone to market. How are you going to do that without writing all the flight controller code? Because obviously, that would take years to do from scratch." And he goes, "Oh no, we're not copying anyone else's. It's all our own." Really? So it's like, so you're not using RG Pilot or something that exists. You're doing it from scratch. He's like, "Yeah." So I said, "So how many developers you've got then, and how many QA people?" And he didn't know. So I thought, you're the director of a company, and you can't answer a basic question like that. So straight away after that, actually, we ended up banning him off the group. It's like, you're not being straight with people. If you can't answer basic questions like that, then there's something wrong here. And unfortunately, it does look that way. I mean, the thing that really concerned me about the videos was they were always doing their Plexidrone, of which, I think it's just the one they've done. It must be the only one they've built, or small number. And there was always fighting around. There was always sports cars and this big mansion in the back, and I was always thinking, right. I bet that's where the money's gone.
Yeah, the clues are all there if you choose to examine it carefully. Yeah, so I'll try and follow up on that this week, and we'll see. And look, it's 15:15, so I will say for the last time. Oh, go on then. All right, well, I'll sit back and relax.
It follows on from last week.
Go on.
I've never shared the screen on here before, so let's see if it can work. Oh yes, this is my new invention. It's my Brewster scope. Anamorphic.
Oh yes. Anamorphic.
What do you think?
Oh, there you go.
That's what Bruce would look like, done properly anamorphic. So that's your bokeh in the background that should be oval. So that's the bit you can't fake. So you see that's my.
What's the bit? Is Bruce the bit you can't fake?
No,
I've been challenged to produce a fake video.
Yeah, you obviously can't fake Bruce, obviously.
Very good. Very good. And funnily enough, now that we've had that talk about that lens, I can't help but see it in other thing I watch.
Oh, I've thought about that. That's what I was hoping.
Oh, look, there's that effect. every other thing I see.
Yeah, that's what the lenses actually look like. So that's how you get Mike's called oval. So
very good.
I thought I would bring that along just so you can actually see it this week. So I've got some props and other quick bits of news, because I did say, can we do a bit of camera news?
You did.
That's the main payload for many people, or where they have drones. It's the secondary business. So the other news in the last few weeks has been GoPro and their Fusion, which I mentioned before. Yes. It's a camera that I love, so I'll get it out as a prop. You see
it's what you use when you're drinking. I've seen evidence of that.
Yeah. You have seen that as well. Yeah, but for when you're getting drunk, and I was testing this out, it's great fun. But yeah, they bought a VR company a few years ago called Color, which is based in France, and it's the annoying American word that really annoys me. They call it sunsetting, and that means we're basically sacking people and cancelling systems. But they basically sunset their colour team, and it came out because one of the guys posted on Facebook about it. So everyone's a bit unclear. GoPro gave the impression that they've moved all those jobs and skills somewhere else, so that all of us that have the 360 camera don't need to worry. I mean, I think as far as the firmware is concerned, that's probably all in the US. It's probably all right. But, there is a question now of, will the software be supported? And you don't really get a straight answer, which is the unfortunate thing. It'd be nice to know either way, should we consider this as discontinued product? Is it going to be supported? Have GoPro given up on 360? We don't know. So that's the news with GoPro. At the same time, one of the competitors called Insta360 has just brought out an Insta360 One X, which it's just around about the same price, probably a little bit more than your bog standard GoPro 7, but that's full 360 and matches. It looks to match the Fusion on features, and some tests that have just come out this week showing it. It needs a bit more scrutiny yet, but it's looking on face value that it might even be sharper. So GoPro might have that double whammy of some competition directly at the Fusion that's coming at a cheaper price point.
Any idea what sort of price? Because I do fancy one of those cameras, so it's all a bit rich for me at the moment.
Oh, let's have a look. I've got the website in front of me, so I'll tell you. I think it was about 400 quid, but I will just check for you.
And that wasn't colour the people that do Auto Pano Pro, was it?
Yes, it is. So all that you won't be able to
oh gosh.
So they've left the links there and said you can download it, but yeah, you won't be getting any new versions of it. So the Insta one is 910 quid, and the Fusion comes in 600 and odd. So it's it's coming at least 200 quid cheaper. So GoPro have got quite some competition there to deal with.
Yes, I fancy playing with those one day. There's so many toys, no time and no money. And with that, is that your final entry there?
Yeah, I'll get on a bit more, but I will spare you all the rest of the camera.
No, go on. You can have another. We'll let you have another camera.
Oh, the other big news in the last few weeks. One of my favourite camera brands is Panasonic. So this is the GH5S, wonderful little camera. But this is the Micro Four Thirds. So this was a standard Panasonic came up with Olympus. And they've allowed a lot of other lens manufacturers since to make lenses for these. So you get loads of lenses for it. So it's a really good system. But they've kept out a full frame, which obviously has been your Canon and Nikon's. But Sony's actually just jumped up there. I think they're in front of Nikon now. And I think Panasonic's finally thought, actually, we're doing good enough now that we can have a slice of that pie. So they've just announced S-series cameras, which are their first full frame cameras. So they're not out until next year. But everyone's quite excited about those. So that's the big news at the moment, that people seeing what Panasonic are going to do.
I see. Again.
And the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, there's Blackmagic Pocket Cinema. And
I think we found a rich vein here.
Yeah, the first ones have come out of that. They've actually been getting into real users' hands, because this is the thing you have, obviously, with every camera, it gets hyped up, and then it gets into real users, and then that's when the gripe starts. So there's people griping about the Blackmagic already, saying that I think some of the initial tests were saying battery life at 55 minutes, still not great, but other testers are saying it's 35 minutes. The autofocus, I mean, to be honest, the autofocus, even on the GH series, isn't brilliant. That's its only shortcoming, but this was really struggling. There was an example given where the guy set up on a tripod, the camera by the looks, looking at a fire burning, and it was continually seeking backwards and forwards. So I've even seen some posts online with people immediately trying to sell them on eBay for a couple of £100 more, and people even offering swaps for the GH cameras. So yeah, that's getting mixed reviews. People saying they love the image, but they don't like all the other issues. And this seems to be an ongoing thing with Blackmagic. They make brilliant cameras that get brilliant images, but all the practicalities around it, battery life and so on, they always seem to manage to disappoint on those. And again, like on a lot of cameras, you've got the flip screen at the back, which is really handy to view and move it around. It has a fixed screen at the back, so you can't move it. So again, that's another frustration. A lot of people finding you're going to have to plug in a separate screen. So suddenly your camera that you bought that you think's cheap, you're buying another screen for it. You're buying a gimbal for it. Suddenly it starts to become more expensive and putting battery solutions in and so on.
All right. I think we've let him have enough now.
Yeah.
We can have some more next week.
I was there.
Well, we know where to come from.
Shall I stop throwing him little bits to bite on?
I think. Well, next time DJI brings some cameras out, then you must tell us properly what it really means.
You've just remembered the camera story, DJI. It's only come out today. But yeah, there's users reporting problems with the Ronin S gimbal, and surprise, surprise, from a firmware that's been released, where suddenly it's going crazy, flipping the camera around and actually hitting the camera against the gimbal. So people are saying they've actually had the cameras damaged by it. So, and it's not just like one or two reports. I've seen where it's gone up today. I mean, a lot of people saying, yeah, it's done that at least once and so on. So it sounds like there's a genuine issue there that needs to be tackled.
Well, that was a good one. We should have had it at the top of the show. And with that, I'm going to say good night. And thank you very much, everybody. Is that what you meant, Bruce? That sort of a thing. Has anyone else got anything else before we go? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much, Adam. Thanks very much. We tried to goad you, but you rose to the occasion every time. I always enjoy your interactions. Thanks very much, Bruce and Jonathan, Nicola and Ian. I hope you'll join us all again soon, dear viewers. Thank you very much. Have a safe rest of the week and enjoy some flying if that's what you're doing on the weekend. Cheers for now. 2100 GMT next week. Bye bye for now.
Bye.
Bye bye.